The combat hall of the Galactic Unified Academy smelled of ionized air and alien sweat. 27 species sat in tiered observation rings above the training floor, each one murmuring in their own tongue. Instructor Kale Veyron stood at the center of it all, 7 feet of pale silver Valyrian, with 3 forearms and a reputation that had outlasted 4 galactic wars. His crest plates were folded flat, a sign of professional neutrality. His eyes, all 4 of them, swept the assembled cadets. Trial 6, he said, his translator caller converting the syllables into 30 languages simultaneously. Death World Combat Conditioning. Voluntary. As always. Silence. Then, as always, silence continued. Joe, a Prothean cadet with 18 bony limbs, made a clicking sound that translated roughly as, "I would rather eat my own molting shell." His species healed fast, but they felt every wound with crystalline clarity. Trial 6 was famous for both. Me, who was a Doric, dense, gravity-adapted, 300 kilograms of walking muscle, shook her massive head. The last participant required 2 weeks of cellular reconstruction, she reminded the room. Nobody disputed this. New York of the Solari didn't even bother signaling refusal. He just changed his skin to the deep burgundy that meant absolutely not in his culture, and stayed that color. Dai, the sleek, quick Pharaoh cadet who'd won 6 sparring championships already this cycle, actually laughed, a high fluting sound. Death World conditioning is designed for species with redundant organs and inefficient nervous systems, she said primly. I have neither. I'll pass. Hi, a hulking Garathi whose species had once been classified as apex predators on their homeworld, simply crossed his upper and lower arms and stared at the floor. Even Wa, the Branathi, whose people metabolized pain like fuel, just slowly shook his segmented head. Not this cycle, instructor. 26 cadets. 26 refusals, in 26 different ways, ranging from polite declination to what was technically a religious oath against self-destruction. Kale Veyron noted each one in his datapad without expression. This was normal. Trial 6 had not had a voluntary participant in 11 academy cycles. It existed, technically, because the original curriculum architects had included it. Nobody had removed it. Nobody had ever felt the need. Acknowledged, Kale said. He was about to close the trial log when a hand went up. One hand. He followed it to its source. Lyra Vera. Human female. First cycle cadet. 163 centimeters tall, which by almost every galactic standard made her physically unremarkable. She was sitting in the second ring, between Dai and the enormous High, and she looked, Kale searched for the precise word, bored. I'll do it, she said. The combat hall made a sound that wasn't quite silence and wasn't quite noise. It was the auditory equivalent of 27 species frowning simultaneously. Kale Veyron looked at her for a long moment. You understand the parameters of Trial 6? 40 minutes. Random environmental hazards. Simulated combatants calibrated to Death World threat levels. She ticked them off on her fingers. Yeah. The environmental hazards include temperature extremes, pressure variance, and simulated toxin exposure. I know. The simulated combatants are modeled on Class 4 threat organisms. I know. The last participant, a Garathi in peak physical condition, sustained 17 distinct injuries before. Instructor Veyron. Lyra's voice was calm. Almost gentle. I know. He studied her. His training told him to respect autonomy. His instincts, honed across decades of interspecies conflict, told him something else. Something he couldn't quite name yet. Very well, he said. Cadet Vera. The floor is yours. She came down the steps to the training floor slowly, the way someone walks when they're not performing anything for anyone. Joe watched her from the second ring. Me leaned forward slightly. New York changed his skin from burgundy to a cautious amber. And then Lyra Vera did something that made the entire combat hall go quiet in a different way. She removed her jacket. It was a simple motion. She unzipped it, the sound was very small in the large space, and pulled it off her shoulders and set it on the equipment rack beside the floor entrance. Underneath, she was wearing a sleeveless compression training top. Standard issue, gray. And her arms? Joe made an involuntary sound. The scars were not decorative. They were not the ceremonial markings some species wore. They were functional scars, evidence of events that had happened and been survived, dozens of them, a map of encounters with things that had tried very hard to end the person they marked. A long one ran from her left shoulder to her elbow, pale against her warm skin. Others clustered at her ribs, visible at the crop of the shirt. Her forearms were crosshatched with the fine lines of something that healed fast but healed imperfectly. Di stared. Di never stared. Di was the most composed being in the academy, possibly in the sector. Di was staring. What Nimi began, then stopped herself. Hi, the Garathi who had declined the trial because of a 6-week recovery he couldn't afford, looked at Lyra Vera's arms and then looked at his own. He was quiet for a long time. Instructor Kale Veyron was watching her too, with an expression that had shifted, almost imperceptibly, from professional neutrality into something older. Something that looked, if you knew how to read Valyrian crest plates, very much like reassessment. Lyra rolled her neck once, side to side. She shook out her hands. She looked at the trial gate. Ready, she said. The gate opened. The combat hall's observation rings had been designed for passive witnessing. They were not designed for what happened next, which was more accurately described as education. The first simulated combatant was a Kareth drone 8 limbs, Class 4 designation, the thing that had given the Garathi cadet nightmares in Trial 611 cycles ago. It came fast, low, and sideways, the way Kareth always moved. Lyra Vera moved wrong. Not wrong incorrectly, wrong unexpectedly. She didn't move like a trained fighter making calculated decisions. She moved like something that had been in enough situations that its body had simply pre-solved the problem before the mind caught up. She went into the drone's trajectory rather than away from it, got inside its reach, and used its own momentum against it in a way that should not have worked against something 3 times her mass. It worked. New York's skin went a color that didn't have a name in standard. The temperature dropped. Ice formed on the trial floor in irregular patches, one of the environmental hazards. Lyra slipped, caught herself on one hand, came back up without breaking stride. The pressure variance hit. Most humanoids showed visible distress at the shift. Lyra's breathing changed, deliberate, methodical, and she kept moving. The Branathi who metabolized pain, leaned toward me and said quietly, she metabolizes it too. Metabolizes what? All of it. 2 more combatants came through the gate. She didn't defeat them cleanly. She took hits, real ones, the kind that made cadets in the observation rings flinch involuntarily. A strike that snapped her head to the side. A blow to her ribs that had 3 alien cadets already calculating her recovery time. She didn't stop. She kept going, bleeding a little from her lip, adapting, solving the new problem in front of her with the focused attention of someone who had decided a long time ago that stopping was not an option that existed. Instructor Kale Veyron stood very still at the edge of the floor. He had trained warriors for 38 years. He had graduated cadets from 11 species. He had sent fighters into engagements that became historical records. He was watching something he had not seen before, or rather, he was seeing it clearly for the first time. Humans, he had known, came from a death world. He had known this the way one knows an abstract fact, catalogued, filed, occasionally referenced. He had known it the way the cadets in the rings had known it before today. He knew it differently now. The trial clock ran down. 40 minutes. Lyra Vera walked back through the gate with her jaw set and her left arm held close to her ribs and a cut above her eyebrow that was going to need attention. She picked up her jacket from the equipment rack. She put it back on. The combat hall was completely, thoroughly, genuinely silent. And then Joe, who had said he would rather eat his own molting shell, made a sound that his species used very rarely. It translated, imperfectly, as, "I did not know. I understand that I did not know." Kale Veyron closed his datapad. "Trial 6, he said quietly, "is complete." He looked at Lyra Vera, who was zipping her jacket back up with steady hands, and he made a small notation that he had never made in 38 years of instruction. Study the human. In the observation rings, in New York, me and Joe sat with the specific stillness of people who have just learned something that changes the shape of a room they thought they already understood. The jacket, it turned out, had been covering a great deal.